Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Classical Antiquity Sidequest, a podcast covering topics from classical antiquity. The period of time is known for, as Edgar Allan Poe put it, the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome. Our next side quest involves a discussion about how a war of choice or an excursion, I think we're calling it a war now, I'm not really sure. Who cares what the Constitution says about that, but we'll leave that aside, the American Constitution. Anyway, some sort of adventure of choice is destroying cultural heritage sites, which we will discuss. And our guide for this next side quest is a professor of ancient history at the University of Toronto. Her first name I can pronounce is Katherine. We learned as we were starting this that I cannot and will not try to pronounce her last name. This is of great shame to my maternal French Huguenot ancestry that settled in the low country of South Carolina and dealt in various types of real property. I will not take any questions about that or what that meant. You can draw your own conclusions from that. They were speculators in many types of property, and they were French Huguenots. Again, no questions. But the ability to speak French died in the low country of South Carolina and did not migrate to the upstate of South Carolina, where I was born and raised. So I will let her introduce herself. How are you?
Hi, Ben. I'm good. My name is Katherine Blouin. So yeah, a real French name.
There is
Very nice
zero.
meeting you.
It is wonderful to meet you, and thank you for coming on the podcast. There is 0.0% chance I would have gotten anywhere close to that. I took German in high school and in college, and I was never great at speaking a foreign language. I'm barely coherent in English. So when you said your last name, I just said, you know what? I'm gonna botch it, and it's gonna sound awful. So, I'm glad that
It's
you.
fine. It's fine. You're not the only one. Actually, it's interesting because I say it's a real French name, but I lived several years in France. I studied there, and the name Blouin is not very common there. Actually, the first settlers who arrived in the area of Quebec City, where I'm from, in the 1660s, I believe were called something like Belois. So the name evolved. There are a few Blouins in France, but there aren't that many. So even in France, they would pronounce it the wrong way, actually. If that
We
makes you feel any better.
No, it does because we very much have wanted, we meaning my wife and I have wanted to go to Canada, and we've wanted to go to uh, Quebec. We've wanted to go to Montreal. Uh, we so we went up, and again, people who listen to the podcast know that there's always something before we get to whatever it is we're going to talk about. But one summer we were visiting our friends in Vermont, and we needed something to do one afternoon. So we drove up into Canada, just kind of went through the southern part of the province there. And it was really interesting to see working class people speaking French and judging you for not being fluent in French. There was a lot of stares. I felt like it was sort of like kind of a French Canadian Steinbeck kind of novel that I was encountering, okay, with a little more. These people were not as happy to see me as I feel like the Steinbeck characters would have been. But anyway, that's for another day. Um, so we've wanted to go back there for years and actually spend time there, see places, and really experience. But damn, COVID hit the year we were going to go. And every time we tried to get back, there'd be some other outbreak, and then there'd be some restrictions on who could go and who couldn't go. So we have just not been able to make it work, but eventually we will get there. It's just going to take some time.
You let me know if you need any advice, especially for good restaurants. There's a lot in Quebec. In
Well,
Toronto too, in very different ways. So yeah.
I've also wanted to go to Toronto um, for primarily sports reasons. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would love to see the Raptors play there and maybe a hockey game. Tell me what we're missing by not having been to Toronto yet.
What you're missing. I think I think Toronto, to me, what makes Toronto so interesting is that it's a very multicultural city. And obviously, you have a lot of those cities in the United States, but I think there's something kind of up a notch with Toronto in terms of the diversity of the population. And to me, this is really what makes it a thriving, super exciting place to live in, but also to teach in, because in the classroom, I really literally have students from everywhere. Which is one of my favorite things. And that also means that there's always a lot going on. There are also a plethora of restaurants of all types from everywhere. So you can always try something new. And then we have the lake. You know, Toronto is by the lake. So we have ravines, a beautiful lake that ends up on your side in the US, but that's kind of a sea within the continent. With a lot of possibilities for walking around and just enjoying the city.
And that's an actual lake, just so everybody understands. Because if you're from where I'm from, or you're from Southwest Virginia, you hear about
Mm.
things called hollers that may not be something that you're familiar with. And you hear about things called rivers that really
Mm.
maybe are more streams at best on a good day.
Yeah, no, it's another scale. It's
Yeah.
another scale. It's one of the Great Lakes, right? So it's Lake Ontario
So
that ends
that's
up in the St. Lawrence River and all the way down to my hometown of Quebec City.
so there's no false advertising there. It's a legit lake, unlike some stuff that you may run into here. But that's another that's a topic we don't need to get into. My
Yes.
although I love Southwest Virginia where I am, I have some real concerns about whether the people who set it up are directionally challenged. It's this whole thing. It's going to take too long to get into. But if Sarah Bond, who was on the podcast, is listening, she may get some of what I'm talking about right now since she's from Roanoke. But enough about me rambling on about Roanoke. Uh, I would like to hear your classics origin story. How did you get into this general field that you're studying now? Put it in superhero terms.
Yes. Well, I got into it through actually Egypt, which is really the let's say the place that I've been pretty much obsessed with since childhood. I like to say I think most people or a lot of people in North America have an Egypt phase, just like, you know, kids have a dinosaur phase. I basically never got out of my Egypt phase. And at the time, there was not any program in Egyptology in Quebec, in the province. So I ended up enrolling in a program at the university in Quebec City called Ancient Studies, which is pretty much the equivalent of classical studies. And eventually, I fell in love with the history of Egypt during that period because I thought you have everything. You know, you have the Egyptians, obviously. You also have an influx of Greek culture, settlers, and then the Romans come in. So this is how I entered into the field of classics. So in many ways, I feel like I belong in several spaces and nowhere at the same time, which I'm totally fine with. But I identify as a classicist, as a historian, and as an Egyptologist as well.
So tell us what you're working on now. What are you researching, and do you have anything significant coming out soon, be it a book or a chapter in a book or anything like that?
Yeah. So my work focuses on Egypt, as I've said. Right now, I am preparing a book called Inventing Alexandria, which is a book that looks at the foundation story of Alexandria. This kind of myth, right? That um, for centuries now, people in Western Europe and in North America have been so enamored with. And I'm trying to deconstruct that and look at, you know, what's the bigger picture here and what do we know about Alexandria and the Alexandrian region before Alexandria was founded. So it's going to be a mix of ancient history. Also, there's going to be a section on what we call historiography. So what, you know, historians have been writing about the city for the past few centuries, and then a part on reception. So how is this story received now in popular media. So I'm writing the book right now, so it's still going to take maybe a couple of years for it to come out. But I have also a chapter coming out in a book that's due to come out anytime soon. It's called The Cambridge Companion to Classics and Race. And my chapter is called on the modern racing of ancient Egypt. So I'm looking more specifically at the way the race of Cleopatra has been the object of fierce debate in the contemporary age. And I'm also looking at the way a woman pictured on a mummy portrait has been interpreted as a European, even though the mummy was found in Upper Egypt. So that's a chapter that's coming. And I have another chapter coming out, which is tied to my other area of research. It's on indigenizing the classics, or rather teaching classics on indigenous land. So I'm really interested in what's the role of classics in the settler colonial project that took place in Canada and more broadly in North America. So this chapter will look at that.
I would at some point, if you can not get offended by my inability to pronounce things with anything resembling a French accent, I would like to have that discussion with you at some point about the Cleopatra thing. And
Of
I'm saying
course.
the thing because I remember in grade school when we would get to Egypt and they talk about Cleopatra and
Mm-hmm.
her skin color, which I'm trying to think of a way to put this. It it's such an odd historical discussion, and it's so people get so passionate about it that it feels like discussing it in any way is just asking for a problem. So that is a discussion I'd like to have at some point. And I don't know why this is that there's some topics that you just can't like, okay, here's the evidence, this is what we have, this is what we know. But this is one of those ones that just gets such fierce debate, like that Netflix thing that came out that
Yes,
was
yes, I
sort of like
discussed
a
it. Yeah.
70s black exploitation kind
Mm-hmm.
of a film vibe, and it's just anyway. But that's something that I'd like to discuss at some point. Again, if
Really
my
happy to
bad
have that
French,
discussion.
okay, good. Just don't let my bad French or non-existent French offend you. So let's talk about what you were kind enough to agree to come on and talk about, which I saw you on Blue Sky talking about things
Yes.
that we're losing because
Mm-hmm.
of checks notes. This might be the dumbest American excursion into the Middle East and Persia or Iran. Look, before I get into this, guys, if I seem disjointed, I have had a hell of a week, and I'm just indulge me here and let me tell you. We're recording this on Saturday, April 18th. On Sunday, April 12th, our son, the boy, comes upstairs from the basement. He's got a bathroom down there, and he's like, "Hey guys, there's water leaking out of the ceiling in the basement." And I'm like, "Bro, that's not good." And
Nope.
he's like, "Yeah, it's not good." And I said, "Well, is this new?" And he says, "Yeah, I have not seen this before. This started today." So a couple calls to the plumber later, and it turns out they're cutting a hole in our ceiling on
Oh my God.
Sunday, and and then that bathroom ceiling, there's all kinds of water there. Apparently something happened with the dishwasher, so it started leaking water in there, and it's a mess. And now we have a plastic sink in our kitchen. My son's 17, so all of you who have young children know the one thing that he likes to do is eat a lot.
Yes.
All the like almost all the cabinets are gone. It is a nightmare. There's like asbestos in part of the house that's
Oh
got to
my
go.
God.
So if I'm using wrong terms or I'm just jointed, just have a little bit of grace here. There were guys at our house till like 9 o'clock last night. It was the whole thing. Anyway,
This is a
so
lot.
yeah, it's but it's home ownership,
Yeah.
you know for a fact your mortgage is the absolute least you will pay in a given month for your house. Okay. It's always more than that. So, um, what we're going to talk about today is, and this might be the dumbest American excursion into the Middle East and into Iran in my lifetime, which as an OG millennial, that is saying something. Okay. Because my early 20s were about the Iraq War. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a statement right there. Okay. We're seeing here uh, a disrupted economy. Things are getting more expensive. Gas prices are going up. Uh, of course, over there, people are dying. People are injured. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Hospitals or other civilian infrastructure is apparently being attacked. The Lebanese-Israeli border, I can't even put into words what's happening there. There are a lot of horrible things going on, and today's podcast is not really to get into the horrible humanitarian things that are occurring over there, although those are worthy of discussion, but that is not something that I feel personally qualified to talk about, um, and isn't really what this podcast is about. But as you've pointed out online, we are losing a lot of important cultural heritage sites. So can you talk a little bit about what we're losing and what has been destroyed that we're aware of so far?
Yes. So in the case, I guess we'll talk later about how the destruction in Iran is part of a broader pattern. But if we focus on the case of Iran, um, since the American-Israeli attack on the country, there are okay. So there are reports of between 130 and 140 registered UNESCO and national monuments and museums who've been damaged. And this includes 100 locations that have been verified. And in addition to this, the bombings have also targeted historic urban quarters and other unverified archaeological sites located towards the border of Iran. I don't know, I guess you have show notes for the podcast. There is a very handy website called heritagewatch.camlab.net that offers a map where you can actually get information on all these sites. So I can always share it with you for the viewers. But this is, this is a substantial number of a heritage site. And this obviously goes against the international law. These qualify as war crimes. And at the same time, it is both extremely violent. It adds on to the violence of the actual lives that are lost. But it's also a very dire problem because there aren't really any real mechanisms for ensuring that this type of targeting does not happen again. And this is all the more so the case that this has become kind of a modus operandum since the genocide in Gaza started, right? Because sites in Palestine and also in Lebanon have been and continue to be targeted. So this is really, really shocking for locals. And obviously, people who work on the past, like me and so many others, are absolutely horrified at seeing this lack of respect for history.
Now, what is, to the extent we can understand, the drunk uncle Pete Hegseth's war plans? Okay.
Yes.
And look, if you're gonna get offended by this, go listen to something else. I'm 44. I'm too old to give a shit about how I phrase this. Okay. So I'm just gonna say it however I want. All right. Um, why are these sites being attacked? Now we can put aside the whole we stand with the people in
Mm,
Iran BS that people will say that they actually support the people of Iran as double tap injuries occur over there, when something gets
mm.
bombed and then another bomb happens. Okay, whatever. Sure, you really stand with them if you're doing that. Okay, but why are these sites being attacked? Do we have any idea? I mean, is it just, again, drunk uncle military strategy? Never thought that, oh my God, Iran might blockade and close the strait, which we've warned about for decades? Or, I mean, is it just you're missing targets? Do we have any clue?
Okay, so it seems in several cases we have evidence in Iran, but also in Palestine and in Lebanon that the bombings were targeted. Um, so we cannot just, I mean, also this is way too many sites and this is way too systematic for just being random, right? So I think there is a clear pattern here. Obviously, Israel and the United States haven't explained their rationale. The
No.
way I understand it as a historian and as someone who works on, who's very involved in public scholarship dealing with heritage, is that in addition to targeting the present, right, the present lives, the present livelihoods, the present living quarters of the inhabitants of these countries, Israel and now Israel and the United States are targeting their past, right? And the past is it's about more than just a building. It's about the relationship of a people with their land. It's about an articulation of their belonging to a place, of their relationship with their own histories and who they are and who they've evolved into being over time, right? So, in a way, I see a direct relationship between the targeting of heritage sites and the targeting of civilian sites. Not only because both are war crimes, but also because they partake in two phases of an assault on time and land, right? So you destroy a people or you terrorize a people by turning their present into oblivion, but also by destroying where they're coming from in a way. So there's something very, to me, perverse about this, very
Right.
cruel. And as I was, looking over notes to prepare for our conversation today, I made sure I remembered that what I thought was right. And what I thought was, aren't the US and Israel not part of UNESCO? And indeed, they are not part of the UNESCO. So there are three countries in the world that are not part of UNESCO. There's Liechtenstein. I did not analyze why. But then as of 2019, Israel left UNESCO. And in 2025, the USA also left UNESCO. That also tells you a lot about, their relationship to, let's say, the legal scaffolding or the principles that were agreed upon after World War II in terms of, okay, we have this common world heritage that is fundamental for peoples wherever they're from. We all need to agree on protecting this. The fact that these two countries very recently withdrew, to me, is not disconnected at all from what we've been witnessing in terms of this targeting of Iranian and others' heritage sites.
So I'm going to side quest a minute, but
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking about UNESCO, I vaguely remembered Trump as part of his perfect encapsulation of everything wrong with the generation that my parents belonged to, the boomers, the objectively worst generation um, in the United States in a long time, but the selfish, self-absorbed, just idiocy. This second term just is like all of it combined,
Mm-hmm.
everything that's wrong with the boomers combined. Um, UNESCO's founding mission is to advance peace, sustainable development, and human rights by facilitating collaboration and dialogue among nations. So the fact that a boomer president is unwilling to A, listen to someone else, B,
Yeah.
work with other people, C, think about the future, just is like checks all the boxes. Okay. And for the boomers who are listening, I'm sorry, you might be good, you might be a good boomer, but your whole generation just is awful. You're just the worst. You inherited a whole world based on a liberal democracy, self-determination of peoples, rejection of authoritarianism, and you have now birthed that back to your children and grandchildren. So congratulations to you. All right. Now, but putting that aside, all right. So The thing that's surprising to me about the targeting of these sites or the fact that they're being destroyed is I remember, again, because I'm a millennial and my whole life is just nothing but watching boomer created conflicts unfold upon the world. Um, is we saw a lot of this happen when ISIS appeared on the geopolitical scene, right?
Yes.
And in and around 2014, there was a lot of outrage about the destruction of these sites. And it's kind of surprising now to see us have some role in this, given that 12 short years ago, there was a lot of anger across the world and here in the United States. So this has happened before, and I guess we're in a Battlestar Galactica and it's going to happen again. But I'm just wondering, obviously we're losing these sites here. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's things beyond what you can see that you're losing. I mean, it seems like it's going to be harder to actually go there and do digs and look into things and find the stuff below the sites. Can you talk a little bit about that? What else we might lose other than these completely unique pieces of history that cannot be replaced?
So do you want me first to talk about the like the case of ISIS and
Yeah, whatever's
the
easiest
other
for you. Yeah.
examples?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe from a historical perspective, I mean, there are colleagues who really specialize on the intricacies of these questions. So I'm not going to go into that level of detail. The the targeting of heritage in situations of war is not something new, right? So just to go back to World War II, for instance, we know that the Nazis partook in that. They also, looted
We're in
in
great
the
company right now, aren't
yes,
we?
yes.
God
they
bless America.
they looted art pieces and heritage, let's say artifacts that belong to the Jews of Europe, right, in large quantity. um, there was a plan even to bomb Paris pretty much out of existence. That was averted last minute. There's a movie that came out about this story last year. I saw it in the plane. It's really good. But basically, my point is this is not something new as an instrument of war, right? The movie. Do you remember the movie Monument Man?
Yes.
George Clooney, right? That was this whole like American propaganda of look at us, we're saving Western art from destruction. Well, now we're kind of in a reverse position. And my point is that it is because of this that after World War II, there were certain rules agreed upon, right? But I guess these rules, just like with the rules at the UN, end up applying to most except a very few. And in this case, Israel and the US are out of it. Now, when we talk about destruction of heritage by ISIS, we have to go back to the American invasion of Iraq, which literally set the stage for all the shit show that happened there, a million deaths, destruction, the
Before
looting
we
of the Mosul and Baghdad Museum.
Right. Before we get into that, though, it
Yeah.
just turned 12:01 p.m. So I can drink now.
Yes.
I am not going to because I'm at my office because of the dehumidifiers that are running all throughout our house and the noise. So normally I would probably crack open a drink here to relive that part of my late college experience. But please continue, as I do not have a therapist in the room to walk me through.
Yes.
Continue.
No, so my point is that the context of the American invasion of Iraq set the stage for, ISIS's attacks on Iraqi heritage. So we're talking the looting of museums, but also the destruction and the looting of archaeological sites, right? So if there's a kind of a power vacuum, what happens is these armed groups are gonna destroy heritage both for PR purposes, because they know it's gonna end up in the newsrooms in North America and Western Europe. But also what happened is a lot of the stuff that was looted was sold. for money. So it becomes a commodity that finances these groups. But now, where are all these artifacts ending up? A lot of them end up transiting through Gulf states, Israel, London, Paris, and then they end up with fake provenance. And you end up finding them either in obscure private collection or in museums
Okay,
in
good. Because
in North America and in Europe.
as
Yeah.
we all know from Indiana Jones, that's where they belong, in a museum. And I did see a great meme that was a parody of the Attack of the Clones meme with Padme and Anakin talking about, where it's always her saying, it's the scene where they're talking about different forms of government, and he's like basically admitting he's an authoritarian. Y'all know the meme I'm talking about, but it's oh God, I can't remember her name from the first movie, the best love interest that Indiana Jones had. And he says, these belong in a museum. And she says, in the place where they're from, right? And just looks back at him
Mm.
and he's quiet. And she says, in the place where they're from, right? So
Yes.
I'm going to assume that's where they are.
Yes.
They all
Oh,
got
we
back where
can.
they were
There's
supposed
the
to.
scene in Black Panther as well with Michael B. Jordan, in the
Oh, yeah.
museum.
Yeah.
That's a great scene. That's a
Yeah.
great scene too. I mean, so that taps into, I don't want to confuse the listeners, but there's the broader questions of, the how archaeology developed as part of colonialism and
Hmm.
how it was at first about treasure hunting and taking out as much fancy stuff as we could to bring it back to the colonial metropolis. Thus, these big museums that we have, even in Toronto, but in New York and in Paris and in London. So turning heritage into commodities or into war prizes is nothing new. And so what we're seeing happening today, even though it takes somehow, in some extent, a different shape, it partakes to that longer historical tradition, right? So, and it is directly tied to what we've seen happening since the American invasion of Iraq. Then later on, Syria broke into civil war. There were similar issues with looting. Before that, there were the Bamiyan Buddha. You remember the Bamiyan Buddha that were bombed by the Taliban in Afghanistan in the early 2000s? That made a lot of noise as well. And then the Arab Spring. A lot of looting happened in Egypt following the Arab Spring. And a lot of these objects ended up in Western Museum, including a golden sarcophagus that ended up at the Met Museum in New York City. And it was traced by the Egyptians because Kim Kardashian took a picture of herself next to it during one of the Met Gala, right? So now it's back in Cairo. So we have this kind of power vacuum that leads to looting, both because the locals are desperate, but also because you have armed interest groups locally, but also dealers at the international level who are making a lot of money out of this.
So the cultural, so you not only are you losing the sites where people go visit,
Mm-hmm.
but the remaining parts are being sold like at a pawn
Yes,
shop to
exactly.
for people to make ends meet. So they're literally
Yes,
having to fork over their cultural heritage to survive,
yes.
or well, the if it's a terrible group like ISIS that comes in, it's to
Mm-hmm.
fund whatever things they want to do. But
Yes.
it's okay. All right. I've got it in a framework now. That's well, and then to go back to trying to go do archaeological research there, that's going to have
Mm-hmm.
to be made tremendously harder, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so right now there are several countries that are being butchered in terms of their heritage, right? So you have Palestine. So Gaza, completely obliterated. Like I don't, it, I'm not sure what remains. Everything has been completely destroyed. We know there were a lot of archaeological sites by the seashore, but now because of the sheer amount of rubble, it seems that the Palestinians might have to throw the rubble into the sea and then to put concrete I don't know if this is going to happen. The genocide is still going on. But if that happens, it means all this heritage also that's submerged is gonna be disappeared, right? So Gaza is really a case where there's been a thorough campaign of annihilation of their heritage. Um, some monuments remain in ruined states. But if we're thinking of archaeological sites, I'm really not sure what's going on. Like a lot of it has been destroyed.
Well,
I
there's a
think some of it remains, but it's really unsure. And then what we see at the same time in the West Bank is a process of theft of archaeological sites by the Israeli authorities, which goes hand in hand with their stealing of the land, right? So there's a weaponization by the occupation of law and of questions of heritage as a way to steal land that is actually Palestinian land. It's in the West Bank or it's in East Jerusalem. So you have destruction, you have looting, and you have the theft, the complete theft of archaeological sites. And then what happens is that these get excavated in ways that respond to a very specific Zionist historical agenda, right?
yeah,
And
and
then in
that's
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
no. I was just gonna say that part of it,
Mm,
the biblical archaeology
yeah.
nonsense, has been fascinating to read and learn about. I had Chance Benar on. I'm probably mispronouncing
Yes.
his last name, but we talked about that and
Chance is
seeing,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, seeing this and learning about this. And I would encourage the reader, and this is why I wanted, or the listener, and this is why I wanted to be rude and interrupt, but to go research some more about this, about the deliberate, calculated attempt by the Israeli government to take away a group of people's identity. And we're talking about it in the context of archaeology, but please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, by the way, so I'm the lead editor of a platform called Everyday Orientalism. So it's everydayorientalism.wordpress.com. And we've been putting out several posts about these questions over the past 3 years. So if the listeners are interested to learn more, the posts are relatively short and they're meant to be accessible to non-specialist audiences, but we also provide extra references if people want to learn more. So
And it's a
we
great
have,
website. I've been there. It when Chance was on, I read a lot from there to prepare for that. It was very helpful.
thank you, thank you. So I mean, we have a post that recently came out on these questions of the weaponization of law for land theft in Israel. And we have a two-part post also coming out on in that regard. And our latest post right now is about it's an archaeological update on what's been destroyed in Lebanon during Israel's invasion and attack of the country. So there too, you have um, a sequence of direct targeting of heritage sites and monuments that is the same as what's been happening in Iran. The difference in this case is that we have a land invasion of Israeli troops. And something that is striking is to see how archaeology is embedded into the Israeli army. So right now, the head of the Israeli Antiquities Authority, I believe his name is Eli Esquizedo. He has an Instagram account if you want to check it out. But we know that they went to Gaza at some point earlier in the genocide. He posted enthusiastic Instagram stories showcasing Israeli troops within the storehouses where the findings of the French mission in Gaza were. So that was completely legal. They were there. Have they looted stuff there? They say they didn't, but they lie a lot. I don't know. And now with the invasion of Lebanon, he also made a story about going with the troops and visiting archaeological sites in Lebanon. So there's both destruction, but also in some cases that fit their agenda, attempts at literally occupying and appropriating Lebanese or Palestinian heritage. Now, in the case of Iran, it's a bit different because it's further away. You don't have the same occupation or land invasion, and there's no way they can pull it off. But we see this same kind of violence to memory and to history towards the Iranian people. And we know the Iranian people rightfully so cherish their heritage and their incredible history so much.
I like the
Right?
way
So
you
it's almost psychological warfare. It's physical, but it's also psychological warfare.
I like the way you described it as violence to memory. That might
Mm,
become in the podcast title here. I made a note to myself. That is also extremely depressing.
yes.
So if you guys need to cheer yourself up after this, we mentioned Monument Men earlier. Don't go watch that. What you want to do is go to YouTube and type in Tiffany Haddish drunk history. Okay. She does the best drunk history episode ever, where she talks about Rose Valland and the Monument Men. It is
Mm,
fantastic. It ends with Tupac. Well, I don't want spoilers. It ends with Tupac and Hitler still being alive together. Okay. It will definitely make you laugh, and you
I
need
need to check this out. I need to
I'm
check
gonna
this
send you
out.
the link. You need to laugh after listening to this
Yes.
very, very depressing topic that we're covering, although it is important. But another another thing that I wanted to discuss with you here is if we want to learn more about this, you've mentioned the Everyday Orientalism, which again is a great website. Where can we go to read more about this and learn more about this ongoing, as you put it, violence to memory that's occurring?
You mean like follow what's happening now?
Well, actually, that's a two. Let's make it a two-parter.
Mm,
Yes, violent, ongoing incidents that are happening. So maybe news sites or a blog or something, but also you've talked a lot about the historical uh, precedent for this and how long
yeah.
it's been going on in Gaza, the West Bank, and the border with Lebanon. Are there books? Are there journal articles? Is there some sort of long history that we could read and recap that covers those things?
So there's actually a lot being done. Like there are colleagues who specialize in questions pertaining to the destruction of heritage and illegal antiquities trade, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot you could choose from. One, I want to get the title straight. My colleague Zina Kamash, who's Iraqi British, she wrote a book recently. It's called Heritage and Healing in Syria and Iraq. I really recommend her work. She's really doing amazing work. Then on Everyday Orientalism, we held, I think it was in 2022, we held a panel on heritage, violence, and war. And we had colleagues from Egypt. Zina was there, a colleague from the Hattar Project who work on the illegal antiquities trade, and colleagues from Ukraine as well talk about these questions. So I can give you the link simply because we have a list of references at the bottom of the post for people who want to learn more. My colleague Roberta Mazza also wrote a book, which is, all things considered, a fun read despite the topic. She's been working on the illegal trade of papyri, in particular papyri that are of interest to American evangelicals. You might know the
Oh
Museum
my
of the
gosh.
Bible and the debacle of the Museum of the Bible. So Roberta has been tracing kind of networks of illegal trade of papyri that started, in the context of the Egyptian Revolution in 2011. So she wrote a whole book about that. It's really good. It's really a great read. So that's kind of for more, let's say, stories that have been happening for the past 2 decades or so. And then for what's happening on the ground, we're trying on Everyday Orientalism to put the notes, put the information out there as it's coming. My colleague Morag Kersel has a great page called Follow the Pots, on Facebook, which is all about these questions. So she posts every day a lot of related references if people want to learn more. If people are interested, in the case, there's a village right now, which is also a heritage site that is in the process of being stolen by the Israeli. It's called Sebastia in the West Bank. They actually have a social media presence. It's called Save Sebastia, if people want update on that. And then I have a colleague in Lebanon called Nelly Aboud, who's been posting pretty much live updates of attacks on Lebanese heritage. So there's quite a lot going on. I can send you all the links, and if people are interested, they can check them
Please,
out.
please do that, and I'll put them in the show notes. But tell me again, if you don't mind, you
Mm-hmm.
said your colleague is located where and covering what's going on in Lebanon?
Nelly is in Lebanon right now.
Okay.
She's in Lebanon, yeah.
So one of the things, because this turned into a very educational and entertaining, albeit depressing in some
Mm-hmm.
respects, free flowing conversation. So I'm not following the question outline like I normally would to the extent that I ever do that. But to the well, okay, trying not to get canceled here, but I don't think there's a way to avoid it. With what the Israeli government is doing in the West Bank and in Gaza to the Palestinian people, the attempt to take the cultural heritage sites away, the
Mm-hmm.
attempts to take pieces of Palestinian history away. Has this been going on pretty much since the inception of Israel, one, as a nation state, and two, get in trouble for asking two-parted questions. Objection to form, compound, sustained, but I'm going to do it anyway. Uh, is the goal to be able to have a way to market that there is no Palestinian people because they have no historical
Mm,
heritage left? See, so nothing
yeah.
happened.
Yes. Okay. So that's the crux of the matter, right? Did you talk about that with Chance as well?
We no, we talked about the Levant generally,
Okay.
and we we
Okay.
we brushed on some of these topics of the history of the Palestinian people and how long that term's been around. So we went all the way
Yes.
back to our
Okay.
Herodotus, but we have not this topic. No, we did not cover.
You must have gone all the way back to the New Kingdom, Egypt, the Peleset people.
I think so, but again, my memory is a little
Yeah.
hazy. If you want to
Okay.
talk about
No, that's
mold,
fine. I'm not gonna
and
go.
if you want to talk about mold and asbestos remediation efforts, I am your
Oh
guy.
my God, asbestos. Okay. Um, okay, so yes, archaeology has been at the heart of the Zionist project from the very start.
All right, we're
And
getting canceled. See you guys. We're out. But go ahead, continue.
listen, I'm going to quote someone who's officially canceled as per the US government, which is Francesca Albanese, right? The UN rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. So the report that led to her official sanctioning by the US was a report called From an Economy of Occupation to an Economy of Genocide, something like this. It was about, the role of corporations into making the genocide kind of possible. And she included in that universities and academia. And there is a passage in the report where she says that archaeology is part of the ideological scaffolding of Zionism, and so of the project of Israel as a Jewish state, right? So the idea is, it's a very European nation state idea, which is completely fictional and ahistorical, which is we were there first, we and only we, which poses a lot of problem from the point of view of biblical text and also from the point of view of archaeology, right? So the agenda here is to streamline whatever you find archaeologically in the ground to show that you were there first. And since you were there first, it is your land and no one else's land, right? Now there's
Let's not
also
bring that to the United States.
yes, exactly. Like this is, it is.
Just
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. It is idiotic. It is idiotic. Recently, there's been this kind of use by Zionists of the questions of indigeneity, right? So there's this claim we are indigenous, the Palestinians are latecomers, they're not indigenous. And then they're trying to align themselves with indigenous nations in North America. One thing they're not thinking about is that within North American indigenous worldviews, the land owns itself. The land doesn't belong to anyone. And if you look at maps where you have traditional territories of nations depicted on the continent, there is this website, I forget the link now, but they have this map, and most of the territory is shared between several nations, right? So it's overlapping. So this idea that there's one person for one land doesn't make any sense
well, it's
from a
so
historical perspective.
ahistorical.
Yes,
If you
it
read like
yes.
if you read some of Herodotus, if you read Josephus,
Mm-hmm.
you see how these groups of people interact with one another. So it's just so bizarre.
It is very bizarre. It is not doing justice in any way to the extremely diverse and rich and interesting history of the Levant as a whole, including the Canaanite and the Jews when they arrive, and the people from the kingdom of Judah and so on. Yes, yes, they were there, but there were other people too who have been there for a long time, and people mingled. And at some point, I'm in the process of writing my book right now. I'm going way back in time to the Old Kingdom, so the time of the pyramids. We already know there was commerce between the city-state of Byblos in northern Lebanon today and Egypt. Like they were trading. In the second millennium BCE, the whole Levant was part of the Egyptian empire. Like not only were there a lot of people living there, but there were a lot of people passing through. There were so many layers. This is all super interesting. So this idea that you will arrive as a settler colonial state with, a strongly Ashkenazi presence, and that you will go ahead and try to prove by doing archaeology that your ancestors from 2,000 years ago were there first, and that the indigenous population on the land, including, by the way, Jewish Palestinians, that they are latecomers, it does not make any sense in any ways. And yet, this is the paradigm that animates to a great extent biblical archaeology to this day, both in Israel, but also in countries outside of Israel, including the United States and some European countries like Germany, for instance.
So the what we're seeing the Israeli government carry out
Mm-hmm.
through its attacks on archaeological sites, heritage
Mm-hmm.
sites, or whatever, is what we would call a results-oriented process. They are going to do something that will justify the end result that they are looking
Exactly.
for, which is in this case justifying why this area of the world should be theirs and nothing but theirs.
Yes. And also, what we're seeing, what's been very interesting for me as someone who was not a specialist of the history of the Levant, right? My narrow area of specialty is Egypt. I mean, I'm a Roman historian, but my work is chiefly in Egypt. I realized that until the let's say the phase of the genocide after October 7, 2023 started, a lot of my colleagues would not touch on the history of this region. They would not touch on anything biblical, really. We're just gonna generally mention it if we have to, but we're not gonna dive into it. I believe there was this kind of unconscious or conscious assumption that this was the territory of biblical scholars. It's going to be too much of a hassle to dive into this, given we're doing something else. You know what I mean? And now, since October 2023, there's been much more interest by a substantial proportion of us who are not specialists of this region into the ethics of archaeological practices there, into how the history of the region has been written and by who. And it's making it harder and harder, I believe, for Zionists to control the message the way they did before. And so in many ways, they are doubling down. They are doubling down, but we're continuing to not to call bullshit when we see it.
Well, I think the to put on my geopolitical expertise hat, of which I do not have one here, but I think the messaging problem is stemming from, in large part, I don't know here in the United States if there's been a loss of credibility with the Israeli government in regard to what's happening in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I say that because my whole life has literally been watching problems unfold over in that part of the Levant. But I do think the unprovoked attack on Israel has by Israel on Iran, Israel and the United
Yes.
States on Iran. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the unprovoked attack on Iran by the U.S. Israeli axis
Yes.
has cost the Israeli government a lot of credibility
Mm-hmm.
because,
You
again,
mean in the US?
in the U.S.,
Yeah.
yes, I think so, and I think that might be because, again, to put on my painful millennial memories hat, George Bush used the 2002 midterm cycle to campaign for the need to go to war in Iraq.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So there were a lot of Democrats, including Alex Sanders in South Carolina, who ran for Senate, who was the president of the college I went to, College of
Mm,
Charleston, former president. Uh, he was saying, and Democrats all over the country were saying, well, I agree we need to go to war in Iraq. I agree with it. But we don't need to do these other things. Here, we just woke up one morning and found out we were dropping bombs on cultural heritage sites in Iran, and nobody was prepared for it, and there was no clear messaging behind it. It was just typical boomer selfishness. I want this now, now, now.
mm-hmm.
And so there's been no justification really proffered for it. And I think that the two governments who have been behind it, the U.S. Israeli axis, there's just no credibility with anything that's being said about this. And I do want to talk a little bit more about Iran. And I know we're getting close to an hour. I don't want to
Yes.
keep you all day. I appreciate it. But with Iran, so I see, the destruction of cultural heritage in Palestine
Mm-hmm.
as far as what the goal is for the Israeli government.
Yes.
In Iran, I'm not sure what the goal is because I don't think there's going to be an attempt to occupy Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's ever the intent. I think it's just Israel wants Iran weaker so they can overrun southern Lebanon and some other areas that may be problematic for them. But is there a plan there other than just striking terror into the heart of the Iranian citizens?
You ask me. I don't think so. My understanding is the logic. Okay, so first of all, international law has been, or the fantasy of international law has been destroyed in Gaza, right? So now it's all, there's no rule basically. So we continue doing the same thing. We just bomb civilian infrastructures, and heritage sites are under this umbrella as well, right? So why would you bomb a primary school? Why would you bomb a primary school in a double tap operation? For the same reason you would bomb close to Isfahan. In my opinion, it is to demoralize the people, to instill a sense of panic. I mean, we know that there was an operation reportedly by Mossad in the US, right, to destabilize and to fuel protests that had started, it seems, organically against the regime earlier in the
Well, we
winter.
botched that.
It was a complete, I mean, the way to which the Americans do not understand Iranian history and the Iranian mentality and Iranian people is just embarrassing for them. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
but they're
So I
not.
think,
Look,
the next step was, okay, we cannot do this. So we have we have to make it so bad and unlivable for the population that they will turn on their regime and just like surrender to us because they're tired of having their, apartment blocks and schools and hospitals and monuments destroyed. So to me, it partakes from the same logic of psychopathic psychological warfare, except that, Iran has been preparing for this for 4 decades. And the Iranian people, if you look at the history of the country in the longue durée, in the long-term perspective, yes, they've been invaded by other powers over the course of millennia, but none of these occupations have lasted. None. None. So just as a historian, I don't think I have much merit. I just happen to be a competent historian. I knew from the start that this would be a gigantic fail. And I believe at some point they must know it, but they're so desperate that here they are bombing, 5 centuries old palaces, an absolute marvel of human mathematics and creation. So who
Yeah.
are you arming? Obviously, that there are real costs that were endured and continue to be endured by the Iranian people, but they've also completely destroyed whatever was left of American credibility internationally.
Yeah, and you said that not understanding Iranian history would be embarrassing to the United States. I don't think these guys are capable of being embarrassed
True,
by things like that. Um,
true.
so anyway, but
It's a story of hubris, as people who are interested in the classics, we know a lot of those stories of hubris. We know where it leads.
yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, that's cheerful. So, let's get into the closing topics here.
Yes.
Give us a book to read. It can be any book. It can be a comedy book. It can be something to make us laugh or smile. It can be silly, or it can be serious. Just recommend us a good book or two to read.
Mm, this is hard. There are so many good books. Um, okay, so this is really not historical at all, but I really love Sally Rooney. Do you know Sally Rooney, the Irish um, novelist?
I think I read a book by her, but I'm so bad with names.
She wrote this book that became a viral series during the
Normal
pandemic
People.
called Yes, yes,
That's the one I read. My
yes,
wife wanted me to watch the TV show, and I read the book
yes,
and watch the TV show. She
yeah.
loves it. She watches that maybe once every year or two.
That's really, it's really good. The book is even better, I think, than the series. But her latest novel, which came out maybe over a year ago now, it's called Intermezzo. This is really a really good read, according to me. And then what else? I'm reading a book right now, but now I'm forgetting the title, and it's not on my desk with me. It's really good. Oh, I think it's called On Savage Shores. Yes, On Savage Shores. It's okay. It is by Caroline Dodds Pennock, and the full title is On Savage Shores: How Indigenous Americans Discovered Europe. And it's riveting, so interesting. So she wrote a history of everything, well, maybe not everything, but what we know about the actual large number of indigenous people from the Americas who went to Europe as early as the early 1500s. It is so good. I'm learning so much. I highly recommend it. I'm obsessed with this book. I'm just very
Okay.
bad at remembering titles, but this is really
Well,
good.
you're way ahead of me. It is a low bar, but you have stepped over it. So, and don't let anybody take that away from you. Now, I was going to ask you about a podcast episode, but we've got Cleopatra and the historiography of Cleopatra
Yes.
down, so we'll do that at
Mm-hmm.
some later time. I'm really looking forward to that. And I just want to say this has been a very interesting conversation. because I found you on Blue Sky, and I do want you to tell us. So this will be the third topic, I think. I said maybe closing two, but one more. Um, uh, I do want to say I was really, while it was, sad to learn about this, I appreciate that you put stuff out there, and I found it online and learned about the destruction of these sites. So can you tell us where we can find you on the internet if we're looking?
Yes, so I'm on Blue Sky. My at is Isis Nokrates. So Isis like the goddess, not like the Islamist organization. So ISISNAUCRATIS. So that's my at on Blue Sky. And otherwise, I'm also the manager of the account of Everyday Orientalism on Facebook. And you can find me also on Instagram with the same at Isis Nokratis.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you want to find us online, go to the socials at Antiquity Pod for most of them. You can go to our website, classicalantiquitypod.com. You can call the podcast 540-632-0160. Ask a question, leave a comment. You will get on the air. If you have a question, either I will answer it or perhaps one of our guests will answer it. But again, call. We'd appreciate it. The theme music is by Brent Earhart. And stay tuned, folks. There are more episodes coming. I have to keep doing this because, as you know, the Classical Antiquity Sidequest is a podcast without end.